Welcome to Caring for Others, the third video in a 5-part series on bereavement and grief in the nursing home setting, facilitated by Dr. Toni Miles. The second series is an additional 5 parts on social isolation and loneliness, facilitated by the Eden Alternative and Dr. Maureen Mikas. These learning sessions have been created for the WellbeingTREE, or Teaching Resilience to Empower Elders Learning and Action Network, brought to you by Altarum with grant funding from the Michigan Health Endowment Fund. Altarum, a nonprofit headquartered in Ann Arbor, has been in existence for over 70 years. We help federal and state health agencies and foundations improve health equity and outcomes through better systems of care. From lower income children to nursing home eligible older adults, our mission is to help those whose health is negatively impacted by social determinants. We are excited to bring you this collaborative learning platform offering Michigan nursing home leadership, staff, residents, and their families tailored learning to better understand and implement evidence-based strategies to improve social isolation, loneliness, bereavement, and grief that is experienced in nursing home communities. We hope that this is the first of many such educational sessions we're able to provide the residents and staff of Michigan homes. This Learning and Action Network, or LAN, is made up of 10 parts. These first 5 sessions were designed to help attendees to better recognize and understand bereavement and grief in coworkers and residents, better manage their individual experiences with bereavement and grief, as well as improve their ability to help others cope with the same. So why grief and bereavement and social isolation and loneliness as topics for education? Nationwide in 2019, 17% of nursing home residents died. Bereavement in nursing homes is not a new issue with the pandemic, nor will it go away as the pandemic subsides. In 2020, deaths went up to 22%. A combination of COVID-19 and deaths of despair drove this increase. Isolation leading to loneliness, depression, failure to thrive. This is especially common among those experiencing substantial loss and is linked to an increased risk of anxiety and depression. Older adults and those with cognitive impairment are more likely to experience complicated grief. The coronavirus has taken the lives of at least 162,589 residents and 2,913 nursing home staff as of January 1st, 2023, according to CMS. This is why we wanted to provide support by teaching specific strategies to better manage bereavement. And today's collaborator, Dr. Miles' ongoing work on unaddressed loss, grief, and lack of bereavement care that is needed to process morbidity and mortality associated with COVID made her the logical and passionate partner we needed for this topic. In addition to being a national expert on grief and bereavement in the nursing home setting, Dr. Miles is an epidemiologist, researcher, emerita professor, and current Pope Eminent Scholar at the Rosalind Carter Institute for Caregivers. She has been focusing on population health effects of the deaths of friends and family members for over 9 years. Her best practices in bereavement care and long-term care is the guide that has informed this 5-video series and will be made available with the videos. Welcome, Dr. Miles, and thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you for having me, and greetings to all of you out there in video land watching this presentation. Last time we talked about how to take care of yourself as staff members and how you can learn what you use to be able to care for others. We're going to go a little deeper into that process. And what you'll be hearing is from people who live and work in the environments that you live and work in. Each building is different, and we recognize that. You should know that all the people who appear on film are gracious enough to let us film them. They volunteered for this because they are as interested in sharing these tips and tricks. So I want to give a shout out to all of those folks too. I said before, you all live and work in villages. Each building is different, and when you're done watching all of this, you want to be able to discuss this openly. My graduate student and I traveled all over the state of Georgia, talking to people, allowing them, or they allowed us to film them having these conversations because they felt this was really important. Assisting others is where it starts, especially during the time of COVID, when we couldn't bring in people into the building who might be a little more skilled, it really did help that we had experts. And so just understand, those of you who work there, especially if you've been there for a long time, you know what death, dying, and loss looks like. You have the compassion it takes to see that other people have needs. You're strong people, but you always understand strength has to be renewed, that you need to be self-aware of this when you're at the end of your strength, and you need to refill your bucket. And what I like to kind of illustrate that is, you see the two penguins in the middle hovering over their baby. The male penguins especially have to endure a long, dark Arctic winter to protect, or Antarctic winter to protect those children. Hugs are always welcome in my universe. Not everybody wants to be touched, but I certainly am a big, I think huggers are really important. And sometimes just standing by. And so these are all some of the tips and tricks you're going to hear us talk about, or hear me talk about today. Okay, so here are the objectives. Assisting others when a death occurs is the focus. And so the first question, when we got people talking about this, we asked the question, what happens in your building when someone dies? And it was interesting to me that some people go, I never thought about that before. And while others said, we have a protocol for notifying all the people who need to be notified. That's where it all begins. Planning is what helps diminish the injury associated with grief. The next objective is we're going to talk about nonverbal ways you can help people who are bereaved. We're going to emphasize that in objective 3 by showing actions that show caring. You can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? In the prior section, you spend time sort of learning to see what grief does, recognize those signs. In this one, you're going to have an action plan. Caring for others. I'm going to make the statement, and then I'm going to show you a video, and then we're going to show you some best practices. So understand, there are experts in your building. They may be colleagues who work on the nursing staff. They may be the people who work for environmental services. You'd be amazed how much you can learn from environmental services because they have the time to listen. And sharing the care plan is, you make these care plans, but does it include a strategy for bereavement care? Here's what one person told us.
Well, I think it's hard to tell someone. We do try to educate, and we have publications, and they're always a help. Little snippets of advice. Doesn't have to be earth-shattering, just, common sense things. But no matter how much you tell someone, I don't think they really get it, like Donna was saying earlier, until they do it, until you go through it yourself when you lose your first resident. And then the second, and then, but just telling them your past experience, giving them the booklets, we have hospice to come in and talk, the chaplain, I think all of that, but I think it's the experience. You never get, it never gets easy, but you can handle it a little more easier, I think.
Sometimes you do have to step away. Like, I can handle it for maybe the first 15 minutes, but then after that, maybe I need to say, hey, Jennifer, I need you to go in and talk to this family. I just can't do it anymore. Maybe it's not a good day. But rely on each other and be able to talk it out. Like the CNA that had the experience with death, but still very uncomfortable with it, we sat out and we just talked about it. And, then it led to another conversation, going to nursing school, So she was able to kind of build on that. Just, I guess, supporting each other.
The two women you heard from were basically the directors of nursing. So this next comment I'm going to make is really for your leadership. The people who provide direct care really will benefit from a clear understanding of what their role is when a resident dies. They are the ones who often find the body. Helping these individuals understand what a resident wants at the end of life is really critical to their health and well-being. They need a clear, so if you have in mind the following question when you talk to your direct care staff, you will help them immensely. And that question is, what do I do if I find a person who is unresponsive? This is why in Georgia, hopefully the Southern accents didn't put you off. I think they're great. I love hearing their voices. In Georgia, we have a document called a physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment, and it helps lay out in paper form what the staff should do, based on the residents' wishes. Because if you feel like you're doing what people want you to do, you're going to be it won't make it not painful, but you at least will have the confidence to know that you did what the person wanted you to do. So that is a very critical question because it drives everything else that you're going to do around those events. And so the best practice, create a plan. The plan to support your grieving coworkers. Some places have what they call bereavement teams. So if you're a direct care worker, we call them CNAs, certified nursing assistants, and they have a person who is actively dying that they are caring for, the bereavement team of other CNAs will sometimes offload their tasks, pass their medicines, or help them with whatever is going on at that moment. So they can spend more time taking care of the person that is actively dying, dealing with their own issues around that process. Planning helps take the sting out of things. Create a plan and then share it. What I want to make is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid in 2015 put out a guidance that said the direct care plan must be shared with members of the direct care workforce. In many, many places we talked to people and it wasn't shared. So everybody on the nursing staff knew that the person, for example, might have strict wishes about not being resuscitated, but the direct care worker didn't. And that's the one who finds the body and it's, oh my God, what should I do? You can help all of that by sharing all of that stuff. And in Georgia, our documentation can be changed. It's not written in stone, but it is important to know what it is at that moment. Everybody needs to know what the resident wants. So here's learning objective 1. Think about what happens in your building when someone dies. We're focused here on the technical aspects that's surrounding the moment a resident dies. This is where you share stories. And this is where I learned the most listening to people that we were interviewing. Some places hide the death by taking the body out the back door. Others, by contrast, have a nice formal ceremony for exiting the building. So this is one of those important questions because it starts the process of caring for the staff who are involved. So what happens in your building? I got to tell this story. Before we started this work, by asking 18 directors of nursing who were gathered for a meeting what happens in their building, and we almost had a fist fight break out because the ones who want to hide it strongly felt that they were protecting the residents from the emotional upset that someone died. But the people who have the other strategy argued equally as forcefully, everybody knows so-and-so's gone. They feel like they need to know and they need to be able to express their connection and their anguish at the moment the body goes out the building. After that moment, and it was quite a sight to see, the ones who were more resistant, the ones who wanted to hide death for emotional protection, started to rethink their positions. I don't want to tell you how to do things in your building because ultimately you know who you have. But consider both sides of this when you think about what happens in the building. The second thing that came up is, who do you notify that this person has died? We talk to therapists who come into the building, we talk to physicians, everybody involved. We talk to the bus driver who transports people to different places when they go off site. And to a person, they all expressed a desire to know when someone has died. And they also expressed a real, something bordering on anger when they found out down the road. We won't be showing it in this tape, but we have a 90-minute conversation between two docs. And they basically tell the hospice groups that care for their patients, if you don't notify me when that person dies, I will never use your service again. That's how adamant they were. Because doctors are people too. So have a protocol for notifying family, notifying staff, caretakers, anyone who the patient's life touched, because it's a village. Nursing homes are a village. And the fourth thing that comes around this is managing the inquiries by other residents and friends that someone has died. We heard too often that's a HIPAA issue. At least in Georgia, it's not. And I think it's mistaken. You don't have to tell them what they died of, but obituaries are public knowledge. They publish them in the papers. It helps that other residents know and their friends know. Now, we're going to talk about all this, but I just want to presage things. The sequence in notification does matter. We're going to talk about that too. So what happens when a resident dies? If family is not present, and this really happened during COVID, how do you tell people? And so we got the participants in our work to share their stories. What I learned, which I'd never, I'm that person of a certain age who doesn't use a lot of social media. Other members of the family who are very much on social media like to be the first to put it out there. When you notify family, if you can't get the spouse or whoever your contact is, encourage them to hold off with social media posts until after the most important person is notified. It is pretty shocking when you're making dinner for yourself and friends start coming to the house to deliver their condolences and you don't know so-and-so's dead yet. That can be quite a shock to the system. So try to stay off social media until it's appropriate. By the same token, resist the urge to post on social media the timing and the location of funerals. Unless you're going to leave someone at the house to watch it, because it does open the family up. Unfortunately, we have a lot of unscrupulous people in our society, and they will break into the house and steal stuff. And I hate to put it that way, but we're sharing practical. These are the practical matters. How you release the news, who you release it to, and the timing of it becomes it's a critical part of healing. We're talking about, this is bereavement care, believe it or not, because you as staff, you may do this all the time, but for your residents and for their family members, they don't have as many experiences as you do. And so they will remember what you do for them at those moments. And this includes, like I said, the physicians who are involved in the residents' care. As a physician, you want to be able to, if you want to attend the funeral or to write a condolence card. And if no one tells you, and you show up three weeks later to do rounds and so-and-so has died, it becomes really awkward. Just notify the docs that are taking care of these individuals. Have a protocol for that. You might have your bereavement team break into these. I'm the one who calls these people, and I'm the other one who calls those people. Have a process. The final thing and we're going to talk a little bit more about this, is the need for memorials. We also had a fist fight about that, which I'll save that story until we get to that slide. People are quite passionate about these things, but here's our best practices. Have a protocol, planning, and figure out who all the people are who need to know. And remind family members to stay off social media until you've made the calls. And then you can do the social media thing that you need to do. But this we've heard from any number of people. We have over 60 hours worth of interviews. From any number of people, these are the processes that make this kind of transition bearable. Okay, that's objective one. Physical signs of grief in others. We talked about physical signs of grief in yourself. It's not always about seeing someone cry. They can complain of being just exhausted, being restless. They may have difficulty focusing or anxiety, stomach aches, headaches. These are things that the residents you're caring for will complain to you about. And if you only respond to them with a new prescription, that can cause problems, other problems that you don't want. Ask yourself when a new symptom emerges, is there a bereavement that recent bereavement that is driving this? I will tell you, on the other side of my research, we're starting to look at population health in a time of mass bereavement. And we have data. The state of Georgia has 8.5 million people as a population. And in 2019, almost half of them, that's almost 4 million people, reported a new bereavement in the prior 2 years. So in 2019, we asked them the question. They said either in 2018, 2019, someone I'm close to died, or multiple people died. And those people, we are now starting to look at that data and put out those papers. So if you Google me, you'll see them. We find that they are possibly smoking more than they had intended, or they might have been able to quit and they've come back. The younger ones are engaged in binge drinking. So if someone's binge drinking, and that means they're sitting in one setting and just, that may be linked to a new bereavement. And so it gives you, by expressing bereavement care, you might be able to help them subvert the injury due to excess alcohol consumption. Grief is not always crying, it's a bunch of other things.
I remember walking through the dementia unit to visit my wife and seeing several patients just sitting silently. And then I saw a CNA pick up a puzzle, set it up, and start to work on it. Patients came up and asked her what she was doing, and she invited them to help her. This was a great way to get them involved in an activity.
We put it in this context because a number of residents will be impacted when someone dies in their building. But we're going to let you hear it from someone directly.
Of course, people want to say something because the silence is uncomfortable, but sometimes silence is what you need. You know, sometimes just being present and not having to fill the space with any words is sometimes best, especially if you don't know what to say.
One of the things I did, I would come at 8 o'clock every morning. I'd be with her, and we would have coffee together. It wasn't as meaningful day after day to her as it was to me, but at least she knew I was with her, and they gave her a wonderful care, And I was interested in seeing that she played games. We would play games. I would play games with all of them, and she would play, and we enjoyed putting puzzles together, smaller puzzles.
Sometimes you don't have to say anything. It's a shared activity. It's being in the flow, being quiet. The other thing that film reminds me to tell you is that men are grieving too. You've heard a lot of female voices in these videos because we women like to talk. Men have deep feelings. They don't always want to talk about them, but being a silent presence can be quite valuable and a shared activity. He is talking about his wife who had dementia, but any kind of shared activity, gardening, puzzling, whatever. Best practice is being present. So we're going to continue talking about residents, families, and their friends because, hopefully people have them and they need you to direct your attention, not just for the residents, for them too.
It's just to be kind. I don't think that Mr. Rogers had it wrong. Number one, be kind. Number two, be kind. Number three, just be kind. And the world itself is such a scary and aggressive place sometimes. We forget that everyone has their own issues and everyone has their own weight. And if we can just stop for a second and just be kind, or show kindness, or show compassion, it can help somebody else, even if it's just for the next 2 or 3 minutes.
What's the message, class? Be kind. Kindness will take you everywhere, especially during these highly charged emotional states. And sometimes you don't even have to say things. That language isn't always needed. It's your body posture, it's your proximity. Kindness can be communicated in all kinds of ways. The dog and the cat. Kindness matters. We've talked about all that other stuff. Number 2 seems like a no-brainer, but it's amazing how important that is, especially now in the time of COVID. Kindness is everything. And so now I wanted you to take a moment when you're looking at this to share some stories that maybe you witnessed that show actions that show caring, or that maybe you've done that were received really well. This is time for you to tell stories. So I'm going to tell you a few stories.
When a neighbor dies and I see the family come in, I try to sympathize, but I never say, I know just how you feel. I really hate when people say that. Everyone experiences death differently. I also try not to say, she's in a better place, or anything else that's religious, because you never know what other people believe.
Yeah. And that, again, out of the mouth of one of the people we talked to.
I think some of the most challenging phrases have been where someone would say, God needed that person. First of all, I'm not expert on what God needs, but secondly, it just kind of creates this lack of personalization. That's probably been one of the most challenging, or those phrases.
don't let them be secluded. Go knock on their door, ask, can you come in, sit down, talk to them. Ask the family members to bring in photo albums or personal pictures, memorabilia, things that mean something to them. Make their living space homey. Things that are their favorite piece of furniture or whatever that means something to them. If it's possible, bring it into their room. Bring them out to activities. Take them out. Spend some time with them. Just don't let them stay idle in their room and not coming out, because then depression could seep in, and you don't want that to happen.
This is advice from one of our environmental services people. Check in on one another. Sometimes you may encounter someone who's in a bad mood and they're really gruff. It's not personal, it's where they are. And so, circle back on another day. They may be in a better place and might even apologize for their bad behavior. What a concept, right? The best practices that kind of sum up caring for others: let them know however you can that you care. So important, so important. You can send a little note. Notes are nice because the person can read them over and over again. The booklets that you have associated with have a list of things that you can do. These days, younger adults are paper averse, so you can do a phone call or a text. Anything that says, I am thinking about you at this moment, will be welcome. You could offer to do something specific. What you see at the top here, someone's bringing a cup of cocoa with marshmallows. If the person likes cocoa with marshmallows, it's great. If they like coffee, like me, bring it. Some places have organized volunteers to visit grieving persons, and that's a great practice. I would suggest, though, that you organize those volunteers in pairs so that just in case you have two people to witness whatever goes on, because sometimes bereaved people are quite angry, as we talked about in the last session. But yeah, visitation, you can always bring me something chocolate. That would be great. Whatever works. That's what helps. Shows kindness. At this point, you are encouraged to stop the video, have a conversation. Hopefully you're viewing this in a group. If you're not, you're viewing this, bring it to work the next day or organize it around lunch, and do a reflection on what deaths have looked like in your workplace. At the moment it's happening, oftentimes we're caught up in the emergent or the breathlessness or the anxiety. Our hearts are beating fast. But sitting back and having a reflection, a post-mortem analysis, something we used to do when I was in medical training all the time, it gives you a sense of what went well. It's always important to do the brags as well as the begs. And what would you like to have seen that could have made that better? So take some time and reflect. I know sometimes it gets to be hairy because we're now in a period where people are dying in bunches. And that's something that has to be planned for too. The first few times it happens, you're always stunned and you don't like it whenever it does, but you're going to have to plan for that because we are moving, it seems demographically, we're moving into a time where lots of people who reach the same age and stage or in their health are dying. That's part of the cycle of life. So if you can carve out any time at all to reflect on it, so helpful. And then you ask yourself, how do you feel at that moment when it was happening? What do we do to cope with those feelings, our own and others? And one way we facilitate that conversation here in Georgia is we have forms. Some people call them advanced directives, 5 wishes. Here it's called a POST. It's the physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment. We spend a lot of time talking about that. Whatever your building uses, bring that to the next session because we're going to talk about how having something written can help this whole process. So have some discussion. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out to come today. The next session, we're going to drill into this planning process. I call it, it's always too soon until it's too late, because that's the response you get when you ask people to talk about this documentation. It's never too soon in my mind, because you don't know when it's going to happen. And just because you put something in paper at that moment does not mean you can't change it. So it's worth having a conversation to get people accustomed to having these. Next time, it's always too soon before it's too late.
Thank you, Dr. Miles.